It's been a while since I first saw her. Initially, I thought that she was a figment of my imagination, but now I'm not so sure anymore. A lot has changed in the last couple weeks. My wife and I found out the child we were expecting is going to be a boy. Angie wanted to keep the sex of the child a surprise, but I was adamant. I had been reluctant to have a child in the first place, but this I had to know. That was a mistake. Now I feel my sanity escaping, slowly disappearing like snow in the sun. Bear with me, listeners. I shall convey the events of the last couple weeks as I have experienced them. You should be aware of some of my family's background first. Like most, my family tree is ripe with drama and disappointment. My father left before I was born. All I know about my father is that shortly before he left, he tried to force my mom to abort me. What an asshole. That's the reason I didn't want to have a child to begin with. I did not want to continue the cycle of absentee fathers which had plagued my family for almost 60 years. Anyways, I'm not here to complain about my father leaving. I'm here to explain why he left, why my grandfather left, and why, after all my trepidation, I must also leave. So it began a few weeks ago. I was in the car with my wife. Angie beamed at me. She looked so happy. Her mood was infectious, and I could not help but grin. She grabbed my hand and gently placed it on her expanding bump. Can you believe it? A healthy boy. I smiled at her, but she must have seen a residue of reluctance in my eye. She grabbed my hand and held it tightly. You're gonna be a great dad. I hope so, I muttered. That night, I fell into a restless sleep. I found myself surrounded by shadows. I'm not a lucid dreamer, but somehow, I knew I was asleep. I knew this was a dream. A thick mist hung everywhere. Shapes danced around me, but when I turned to face them, they dispersed into the dark. I heard their muffled cries. The damned called my name. The shadows terrified me. I wanted to wake up. I closed my eyes and I pinched my arm. I felt my nails dig deep into my skin. The pain numbed my senses. I opened my eyes expecting to see Angie lie beside me, but what I saw baffled me. I stood in a little clearing. In front of me stood a hut. I looked around, but the thick canopy of the jungle imprisoned me. There was something waiting for me in the hut. I could sense it. My legs had already begun to move, as if they were answering a call my brain had not yet registered. I opened the door of the hut and I stepped inside. It was dark, but I could see the outline of a woman in front of me. At least I thought it was a woman. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, her features sharpened. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her skin was cracked by dark wrinkles, like a spiderweb that slid across her pale flesh. Her eyes were dark. I could not distinguish the pupil from the iris. Her hair was her most striking aspect. Her long black locks waved through the air, like they were being blown by an invisible breeze. She stared at me with an empty expression. There was no emotion in her eyes, just bottomless black pits. It unsettled me. Who are you? She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed at the floor between us. A pile of papers were neatly stacked on top of each other. I stumbled forwards and I picked them up. There were 2 distinct envelopes and a small leather-bound book. I was shocked when I read who the envelopes were addressed to. One was addressed to my father, the other to me. I looked at the woman. "What is this?" She gave me an empty look and she snapped her fingers. My eyes opened as my body lunged forwards. I was drenched in sweat yet immediately relieved to see Angie asleep beside me. It was a dream. I sighed and I turned over, hoping to get a couple of hours of rest before I had to go to work. And that's when I saw the 2 envelopes and a leather-bound book on my end table. It took all of my willpower not to scream. After a couple minutes of contemplation, I grabbed the papers and I went downstairs. I took the older-looking envelope and the book. They were meant for my father. The book was a journal, and my eyes widened as I recognized my grandfather's name scribbled on the cover. I flipped to the first page, and this is what it said. Vietnam, 1967. Today we left for our 10-day patrol. Nobody felt like scouring through the bush again, waiting to get torn to pieces by a spray of bullets from Ewan's AK. We decided to take something with us to calm our nerves. Our sergeant had gotten his hands on some LSD and handed one out to everybody as we stood in single file. "All right," the Sarge said in his southern drawl as he popped his tab. "Let's go shoot some commies." We all followed suit. We began to stalk through the jungle. Movement was slow, or so it seemed. I looked down at my feet and I noticed that they were on backwards. It looked comical. I giggled. The corporal in front of me stopped and he sniffed the air. "Damn, those are some nice smelling colors." "What?" He turned around. "What?" The corporal looked at my feet and he started laughing. "Your feet are on backwards." "Shut up," I heard the Sarge say. His voice seemed near, but I could not see him anymore. Suddenly, I heard the buzz of a bee. "Hang on," I said. "Are there bees in the jungle?" "Do you hear Soul Kitchen?" the corporal said while staring at a vine. "Did you say something, Sarge?" I heard the buzz again, and then something kicked up dirt close to my feet. "Do bees dive?" The corporal got serious. "They can only do the backstroke." "What?" The corporal faced me. "The doors, you know." And then more bees kicked up dirt next to us. Before I could move, I felt a hand grab the scruff of my shirt and smack me into the ground. "Return fire," the Sarge yelled. I looked at the corporal and I saw him drop. His head exploded. It made me think of the time that I threw a plate of spaghetti against the wall. I laughed in sheer terror. The platoon returned fire against the invisible mass ahead. The colors amazed me as I saw light burst out the end of my M4. It looked loud, but I heard nothing. "Where are they?" I heard someone yell. "The trees," returned a familiar southern drawl. I stared at the endless jungle before me. "What trees?" More bodies dropped. I felt good. The sergeant yelled in my ear. I took the machine gun that he had handed me and I opened fire. The world exploded. Trees obliterated before me, like wheat cut down during harvest. I laughed with glee as I spun around and around. Hours seemed to pass. When the burst of light left the nozzle, I cried. Why is there spaghetti everywhere? The platoon was gone, and the next thing I remember is running. Deeper and deeper, I crawled through the jungle's intestines. The heavy machine gun ached in my arms. A thick mist suddenly engulfed me. It was all-encompassing. Not knowing what else to do, I kept running. And then the mist was gone. I saw a doll ahead of me. It stared at me. Its eyes cried in panic. I shot at it. A beautiful stroke of red sprayed the trees for her. I ran further and suddenly, I found myself in a clearing. Huts protruded the earth like tiny hovels. There weren't many. I saw the dolls run around. One by one they fell. The red was addictive. I needed to see more. Only when I felt the gun burning in my hand did I stop. All the dolls lay still. A river of beautiful red spread. It smelled sweet. My knees buckled and I vomited. And the world went dark. When I woke up, I screamed. I was covered in blood, and it stuck to my hair. It stained my clothes. I looked around at the bloated corpses of children and women torn apart by bullets. I counted 46. And that's when I saw her. She terrified me even more than the bloated hell around me. She was unnaturally pale. Her hair swung wildly along her shoulder, although there was no wind. Her eyes were bottomless pits of hate. Her skin was cracked all over and seemed to be smoking in the morning air. Instinctively, I reached for my pistol and I aimed it at the creature before me. Our eyes met and the pistol fell out of my hand. I knew that I could not hurt her. "Are you here to punish me?" "I'm here to give you a choice." The sound escaping her lips was not English, yet I understood the words. "Are you evil?" My words brought a twisted smile on her face. I saw her pointy teeth glisten in the morning sun. The simplicity of humans. There is no good or evil, only action and consequence. My mind could not comprehend what was happening. "Are you human?" She tilted her head. "What are you?" My voice sounded weak. "It would only scare you." I stared at the little body spread before me. "I did this?" She nodded. "An action for which you now must bear the consequence. I usually don't interfere with human pettiness, but this village believed in me. And now that they are gone, I must find nourishment elsewhere." "What?" "Do you want to live?" "Yes, I've just become a father. I would like to hold my son." She snorted and laughed, a humorous crackle. "Then this is your choice." My grandfather's journal ends here. I opened the envelope addressed to my father. It included a hastily scribbled note. "To my son, I've gone to destroy her. I made the wrong choice and I am sorry. Forget about me, and don't go to Vietnam." I grabbed the second envelope and I tore it open. The letter inside was addressed to me. I recognized the scribble as my father's handwriting. I had seen it in old photo albums. "To my son, I hope that you never read this. I hope that you had a daughter, and I hope that you never see her. If you read this, everything I've done will have been in vain. I hope to end this curse, but if you read this, I failed. Whatever you do, don't make the same mistake that I did. Don't come looking for me. Goodbye, Dad." I ran to the kitchen and I downed half a bottle of Jack in one go. When I returned to my study, the journal and envelopes were gone. Desperate to believe that it had all been a dream, I crawled back into bed. As I laid beside Angie, I gently caressed her growing bump. Her short, rhythmic breathing was soothing, and it quickly lulled me to sleep. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the dark underbelly of the hut, and the weight of the jungle bore down on me. I felt her lingering in the dark beyond the light of my eyes. "Come out!" My voice was steadier than I had any reason to expect. She slid into view. Her hair swept wildly around her shoulders, as if its roots were caught in the grasp of a tornado. "You are more calm than most." Her voice was clear, but I'm sure her words were not English. I can't explain how I understood her. I just did. "This is not a dream, is it?" She shrugged. "Even if it is, does that make it any less real?" I locked onto the dark pits of her eyes. "I read the journal. I know what my grandfather did." She cocked her head a little to the side. "You took his life as payment, didn't you? As revenge for the massacre that he committed." "Would I have been wrong to do so?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know," I answered sheepishly. "I don't know, but why take my father?" A whirlwind of whispers crept out of the surrounding darkness. I felt the weight of their words crash upon me, like the waves of the sea trying to drag me into the unknown depths. And then as sudden as they had appeared, the whispers ebbed away. A chill crept down my spine. My eyes shot round in the dark, trying to discern meaning where my mind could not find any. "I gave your grandfather a choice. He failed to honor our commitment. It's unfair." A surge of wind almost knocked me off my feet, and the depths of her eyes turned to ember. "Typical human arrogance. Why should you be entitled to fairness, to anything? The mechanics of reality are far too complex for your feeble mind to comprehend. A bargain was struck and it was not honored. The consequences are just. Whether they cross space and time is irrelevant. This is your fate and now you must submit to it." "You're gonna take me?" She shook her head. "Then what do you want?" I almost yelled the words. She smirked, seemingly amused by my spirit. "You too shall face a choice, like your father and his father before him. I can take you to your father. I can show you their fate. But once your path is chosen, there is no turning back. Their fate will then also be yours to share. And in time, as your child grows old, he too will face this choice. That is the price you must pay for the knowledge I can bequeath upon you. And if I chose to walk away from all of this, if I choose to remain ignorant to their fate, then you are free. You will wake up and all of this will gradually slip from your conscious mind. So if I do nothing, I will never see you again. You will stay away from me and my family." She nodded. "If you stay away, I shall consider all debts to be paid." "Okay," I said, unable to keep the enthusiasm out of my voice. She smiled as she slid forward. A bony finger stroked my cheek. Her long, dirty nail made my skin tremble. So young and so naive. I would not be so certain of myself just yet. The urge to explore the unknown is so deeply ingrained in your kind's nature. After you reach a certain age, the spirit of your soul converges with those of the dead from who you sprang. Their fate no longer precedes yours. The continuum is broken. They bask you in their light and they instill upon you their darkness, both contributing to the destruction and resurrection of your soul, erasing the man you were to become, and recasting you as an echo of their past emotions. You presume choice when deep down, a festering uncertainty has already taken a hold of you. I shook my head, annoyed by her words, I am the master of my own fate. Her lips curled in a devilish grin. Her sharp teeth glistened in the dark. We shall see. She snapped her fingers. I woke up to the sound of Angie vomiting in the bathroom. Weeks had passed since then. I had changed. I kept telling myself the choice I had made was simple. My only option was to stay with my family, with Angie and my unborn son. And yet, an uneasiness took a hold of me. As the days crept by, I became more restless. I thought about my father. I thought about my grandfather. Not a single day passed without my thoughts drifting towards them. I wanted to know what had happened to them. I needed to know their fate. It loomed over me like an itch that I could not scratch. The relationship between father and son is a strange one. It's defined by an ambiguous relationship of love and hate. It often ends in some form of patricide. Sons growing up wanting to be the man they wish their fathers to be. It's only natural. But I had never met my father. He had only ever been a shadow in the crevice of my mind. And now that I had the chance to see him, to be with him, those thoughts gnawed away at me, until I felt my sanity itself was slowly being eroded away. Shortly before the birth of my son, I made up my mind. I was going to go to Vietnam. I had to. For my own sake and for that of my unborn baby. I had to know the truth. I will spare you the boring details of my journey. I took a plane and from then on, I was led by a force beyond my comprehension. I felt like I had a compass inside of me which guided me with such clarity. It made me rethink the absurdity of the three wise men being led by a star to Bethlehem. She knew that I was coming. As I stood on the edge of the jungle, I felt alone. The land spread before me like a beast eyeing its prey. I stood at the edge of an abyss, and yet I had to know. I forced my feet to continue as I eyed up the jungle one last time, willing to lose myself deep within its bowels. God knows how long I trekked through that jungle. Time is a tricky thing. Nothing can be more treacherous than the notion of its progression. Minutes could have slipped into years with the same ease as my every breath. I felt like I had left the plane of human understanding. I had stumbled elsewhere into a darkness that I was not meant to comprehend. Suddenly, a thick mist crept over me. It dulled my senses. I felt its weight crush my shoulders. Every step became a struggle. Was this her last warning? I closed my eyes. Let me pass. I fell to my knees. I want to pass. A sudden gust of wind blew apart the mist. Suddenly, the trees gave way and I found myself in a clearing. A small hut stood lonely in its center. Before it lay an array of shiny, oval-shaped stones. The stones protruded from the earth like miniature hovels. I counted 46. I was acutely aware that I was being observed. My eyes fell upon 3 stones consciously planted away from the others. The first 2 stones looked barren and scared, devoid of any warmth. Grotesque copies of their shining counterparts. My eyes lingered upon the 3rd stone. Light and dark equally shared its surface. Their touch alternatively caressed the stone surface. It seemed strangely intimate. As I walked past it, it seemed to me that the light was slowly retracting, leaving a path for the all-consuming dark. As I stood before the hut, the door slowly creaked open. And then I was inside. A chorus of whispers rose out of the dark. Their meaning no longer escaped me. She stood before me, her features illuminated by the dim stroke of light from the setting sun. The ember pools deep within her eyes glowed fiercely. A fire within had been rekindled. Her lips curled into a grin as she saw my eyes dart towards the darkness behind her. Her sharp teeth glistened as fate bared itself before me. For death was her shadow,